On the VC3 News Update, physician Dr. Dwayne Murray detained by police over post allegedly made via social media platform Facebook. The National Cultural Foundation, the NCF, launches its collection of Vincentian patriotic and school songs at the Peace Memorial Hall. And the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Community College, the SVGCC, signs a Memorandum of Understanding with the Sajako Cahill School of Business Management and the University of the West Indies.
And in sports, Vermont and Sandy Gully played to a 1-all draw yesterday at the Camden Park playing field. And Guardian General Saints have punched their ticket to the quarterfinals of the SVGCA Inc. Neil Williams T20 competition. In the region, the documentary 501 Not Out, highlighting the extraordinary career of Brian Lara, opened at the 15th TNT Film Festival.
Join us at 7 p.m. this evening for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
In the shade, 96 degrees in the shade, real hot, oh yeah, in the shade, 96 degrees in the shade, real hot, oh yeah.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, September 18th is $394,300. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Roundtable Talk. Well, we are back with the same panel from last week. We did say at the end of the program that we'll come back to talk some more, but we didn't think that it would be so soon. But by popular demand, and we've been getting the feedback that people wanted to hear more about this bill and consumers' rights, etc. So we've got our expert panel back with us in the persons of Attorney at Law Danine Jones, Junior Bacchus, consumer advocate, and labor relations expert, J. Bonadie. Welcome back, lady and gentlemen. Last week we spoke about the rights of the consumer, we spoke about why consumers need protection, we spoke about the progressive nature of the bill, and probably would start with that again this evening. And I know we ended about the whole question of pyramids and the pyramid schemes. So let's start again by reintroducing the whole concept of the bill and why is this bill so important? Junior?
I think my surname is B, so I will go first in the alphabet. Let me say first, good evening to St. Vincent and the Grenadines and viewers around the world who are following this program. And we have finally passed the Consumer Protection Act for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And over the years, we have had some kind of protection, but mainly in the area of goods. And this act, we said it's a very progressive one because it's very wide. It covered not just goods, but it also covered services. It also makes reference to the environment. We need to have a healthy and safe environment, and therefore consumers are protected, are provided with mechanisms to ensure that there's healthy and safe environment. And I must say that this act came out of several other pieces of legislation that were contemplated. Firstly, at CARICOM level, we had the discussion for 25 years ago, starting with the development of a harmonized legislation for the CARICOM region coming out, in fact, less than 25 years, because it came out of what the CSME were providing, the single market and economy. And it was important for us to protect consumers in that type of environment. Then at the OECS level, I know Danine will expound a lot more because she was directly involved there. And then at the local level, last time I mentioned that we started here in the early 1990s with the development of a consumer protection bill for St. Vincent and Grenadines. But with all what took place since then, we have been able to come up with something which I consider to be very good for all parties concerned. And Bonds will tell you at the select committee level, we had the contributions of the business community, we had the contributions from the consumer sector, from government, so all parties were very much involved in the development of this bill. And we expect now that the public will come on board, and through this program like this, we get the public becoming more aware of how they are required to prepare themselves for the implementation of this act.
Danine, from a legal standpoint and from your intimate involvement in the crafting, from regional standpoint, how important is this new piece of legislation?
The bill, the act now is very wide in its scope. It covers consumer rights, obligations in relation to the providers of service and those who sell goods. It also covers unfair trade practices and unfair terms within contracts, defective goods. It covers a myriad of information in relation to consumer protection. So it is important to everyone, not just consumers, but traders, to know exactly what is in the bill. Importantly, it sets up a mechanism for getting disputes heard and adjudicated upon as quickly as possible in reasonable time, so that you can, as a consumer, have any complaints dealt with. It also gives teeth to the Department of Trade to ensure that they can go out there and do their work in an effective manner. And it also sets up a tribunal. It establishes a tribunal which will hear complaints. And this is in keeping with the OECS draft bill that was prepared. And that bill was not just prepared just once. We, at OECS, at the time when I worked there, it was an EU-funded project. And they gave money to the OECS to essentially ensure that we were able to set up a regime within the OECS to deal with both consumer protection and competition. So the bill takes into consideration a number of areas that you would see reflected in other areas of the world, in England, in South Africa, in Australia. So we have a good piece of legislation, and I think that once we get rolling with the implementation, that we will be able to serve the customer, the consumers, those who consume services, those who consume goods, and we will also be able to service the business community, because good customer service means sound competition, a framework and a market in which you can fairly compete with each other.
Burns, what the prevailing circumstances which necessitated this kind of legislation?
Well, I think I'm glad to be back, and I am glad the feedback was very good. I can say the majority of the consumers are workers, working people, and it's very important for this, but I want Junior to explain something, because he's the only, as far as I know, the only agency that deals with consumer affairs. And one of the important things I would like to highlight tonight is how do we lodge a complaint? Which is a very important thing. Because generally speaking, people are always making complaints, this, that, you know, you hear the talk. But how do you bring that complaint forward? And the bill makes provision for that. It also makes provision that a consumer organization can represent you in bringing forward your complaint. It also deals with underage consumers. Consumers that are children, so to speak. Yes. And I mean, in a sense, nothing is left out of this piece of legislation. And it also deals with if you're a consumer and your supplier dies, what happens? You know?
There's redress for that.
We sometimes don't think about these things, but they do happen.
Yes.
So all of that is covered in this bit of legislation. And of course, I know that people will go to Junior before they will come to me.
Right.
Because, you know, he is ably established and set up to deal with those things. And the bill makes provision to accord a place for consumer organization that will deal on behalf of those impacted while they're going about their daily business and so on. So it's a very good piece of legislation, and as we just heard, they did a lot of background work before it got to the stage where we are today, that we can hold it up. And as you said in your last intervention when we met last time, it's a good note for the departure of the minister who was responsible for bringing in this bill before he finally retires from politics.
Well, I want to respond to Bond's question, but I must say for the minister, Sir Louis Straker, I have been lobbying him from the first period when he entered politics. And he has been complaining to me ever since about a particular issue, the abuse of funeral homes. And you heard Sir Louis, when he presented this bill in Parliament, he made reference to that. And he has always been complaining that in funeral homes, they sometimes just charge you based on how you look or who family you have abroad, and you know, if they know you're getting money, but all that will be remedied by this bill. No longer you go to funeral home and they look at you, oh, Teresa, you're a big family, you have money. So $25,000 to this casket and include all these services and so on. That cannot happen. You must display your prices for your caskets and the cost for each of the services that are provided. But let me deal with Bond's earlier question about complaint. The procedure we have, even before this bill, the procedure first is when you have a problem, you could simply start with the people who caused the problem. So in many businesses, you will have like customer service officers, or you will have a supervisor for whatever department or a manager for the business, as the case may be. So if I go to a store, if I go to a provider for service, and I have a problem with them, maybe the food sour, maybe the shoe is not fitting properly, my first line of complaint is back to the business.
Back to the business. We'll talk some about that when we come back.
Okay.
Because this is a
this process is very important.
Yeah, so we'll talk some more when we come back from our first break. Back in just a moment.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, physician Dr. Dwayne Murray detained by police over post allegedly made via social media platform Facebook. The National Cultural Foundation, the NCF, launches its collection of Vincentian patriotic and school songs at the Peace Memorial Hall. And the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Community College, the SVGCC, signs a Memorandum of Understanding with the Sajako K-Phil School of Business Management and the University of the West Indies.
And in sports, Vermont and Sandy Gully played to a 1-all draw yesterday at the Camden Park playing field. And Guardian General Saints have punched their ticket to the quarterfinals of the SVGCA Inc. Neil Williams T20 competition. In the region, the documentary 501 Not Out, highlighting the extraordinary career of Brian Lara, opened at the 15th TNT Film Festival.
Join us at 7 p.m. this evening for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
Welcome back, and just to let you know that you can make your contribution to the program by sending your questions to us right here on our Facebook page, and we'd be happy to respond. Edmund Jackson is saying here, please indicate whether the Act addresses protection of consumers using electronic payment platforms that are emerging locally. So we can talk about that after Junior finishes the point he was making just before we took that first break.
Yeah, so I was simply making the point that you have a problem with a store or a provider of a service. Your first line of complaint is to that store or the company that is providing the service. Many times they will try to solve it right away, but there are occasions when they are very stubborn, they are determined that they are not prepared to deal with your issue, and then and there you decide to move to the next level. So I'll give an example in two instances and show how the Consumer Association as it relates to the issue as against the Consumer Affairs Department. If, for example, you have a problem with CWSA, you have a problem with the service for water, you constantly having your water cut off, or they're not sorting out the bills, they say there's some leak and so on, and you go to them and they're not having that solved, we recommend, in the case of a government parastatal like CWSA or VINLEC, that you come to the Consumer Association. You come to us. We will take an issue like that, and we'll take the matter up with the management at CWSA on your behalf, and we'll represent you at that level. When it comes to us, we could make record of the complaint. There's a complaint form that you could fill out, or we will help to fill it out. If, on the other hand, you went to a store and you buy an item and there is a problem and they are not helping you to sort it out at the business level, we recommend that you take that complaint to the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. There's a Consumer Affairs Department. So we have that kind of working relationship where we do not want, like, say, a government department to be negotiating for our consumers with a government agency like CWSA or VINLEC. So we share that over the years. We try, in cases there are times when people have maybe some more confidence in the association over an individual from the department, they can come. Many occasions I had to return funds, even this week. I went with a consumer to return some funds that they bought from a particular store. They had them they have the funds chested, reorganized, change if they have to change, refund if they have to refund. So that is the protocol that we operate under, where we from the association try to focus on the government agencies, but we can do any other. There are some agencies where, like, you have a problem with flow, NTRC have a complaints department. So you do not necessarily have to go to the department or come to the association. You can complain to the NTRC. They have a complaints form. The problem is that a lot of people don't know how to find them and don't go and make the complaints. There's a period within 7 days they are required to investigate and give a response and so on. So there's that procedure. The complaints can be verbal, it can be written. There are some consumer who may not be able to write, may not be able to fill out the form, but in all cases there's a form available. We can fill the form and then we take up the matter. We try to solve these complaints, these problems within a week or less, because you can't have lingering problems. So that's the complaint process. You had mentioned another issue,
So can we talk a bit more about the flow?
The flow?
Yes.
Okay, so once there's that complaint, we look into the matters. If you have a problem, let's say with a pair of shoe, or a fan as I use as an example, you ought to have a receipt. I cannot go to a store and you don't have proof of purchase. So we want to be certain that you purchase the item at that location. If you purchase via credit card and you don't have a receipt, the credit card payment could trace that you did make the purchase at that location. So we will take that up. If you go to the store for redress and they are not budging, they are not prepared to make the adjustment, then the Consumer Affairs Department under this law now will take the matter up to the next level, which is either the point of a tribunal, which will sit to address the matter, where they can call on the business to come in and report to address the issue, and the consumer will be represented by anybody, not necessarily a lawyer, before the tribunal. The tribunal can say, well, let's appoint a mediator to help to see if they could bring about a negotiated settlement. If that is not done, then the tribunal can rule. According to the legislation, the tribunal ruling can be final. Well, in all cases in St. Vincent, you can have an appeal. So if you wish to appeal the ruling of the tribunal, then you can go to the court system and take the matter beyond that.
One thing which you should explain. Sometimes the people hear things. NTRC.
Oh.
Because you understand, they say,
Yes.
well, what is the NTRC?
Yes.
You know? And I think that a lot of the complaints which we're hearing about on a daily basis relates to institutions,
telecommunication
in the communication
services, yeah.
field, of which they play a very pivotal role. And so I think that's what a lot of people want to know.
Yes.
But
I think
we can also we don't necessarily have to rely
to
on
go
the
there.
NTRC alone
Right,
to address
yes.
them, because I have had consumer and dealt with complaints without going through
to
the
them.
NTRC.
Yes,
NTRC more deal with a lot of the technical type issues. But if you have, if there's service issues, it's better to go through the NTRC so that they can, refund you, or they can decide how you could be compensated for the period of time, let's say you didn't get the internet service, and make sure that there's an adjustment to your account and all that. We can have that ruling. Or there are penalties that the company may also have to face if they fail. So the NTRC is the National Telecommunication Regulatory Authority, located in the NIS building. It has been there for many years now, over 20 years, and it is responsible for telecommunication, including broadcasting, if you have problems with radio services and problems in those general areas.
And maybe one of these days I'll get the NTRC on here to talk.
And they were part of the select committee that was in Parliament.
Just to say, Theresa, though, that generally when you have a law that pertains specifically to an area, you should really use that law. And I think it is contemplated by ECTEL, the Eastern Caribbean Telecommunications Authority, that there would be similar regime in terms of complaints. There has been disputes, regulations made in the several ECTEL countries. How well they're working, I don't think they're working as well as they contemplated originally. You can use this legislation in relation to telecommunications, especially because we know that the regime for telecommunications may not be working as well as we want it to. But if there is a piece of legislation that refers specifically, that should be the first place you should go to. And as Junior said, the first point of contact when making a complaint is to the actual provider of the service or the seller of the good. So you go there first. But if you know, well, you can't get any redress, then you make your complaint to the department. But I just want to put in just a little caveat here, because we can't leave out the NTRC out of the process. So just to put in a caveat here, but we want to ensure that all the regulators are working in tandem to ensure that the consumers are well protected.
Spoke about the tribunal earlier on.
Yes.
Who will comprise that tribunal?
Well, the legislation provides for a 3-member panel. They all do not have to be legal persons. For example, the minister could appoint the chairperson. The chairperson I think it has to be a lawyer. Right? And then 2 other members, one of which appointed by the Consumers Association.
Yes.
So the consumer NGO that is involved in the particular country can appoint a member of the tribunal. It's almost similar. In fact, we pattern it from the tribunal at the labor court.
Where each party
can have. I thinking that the business community could also appoint the 3rd person. So you have a legal mind, the business community, and the consumers association.
And that's what
that's
the law provides.
3 members.
That's what the law provides. But interestingly, though, there is no real quorum per se, because you can because they don't want to delay, have lengthy hearings of the tribunal, and maybe you can't get these 3 persons together. One person can hear the disputes, and the disputes will have effects. As Junior did indicate earlier, there is an appeals process where you can appeal the ruling to the High Court if you're not satisfied on either side, either the consumer or the provider of the service or the seller of the goods. So there is room for appeal. Okay. So there's never really a final decision in those at that part of the hearing process. You would have to go further up, and of course High Court, you go on to hear if there's an appeal and so on up to the higher levels of the courts.
Okay, we'll take a second break and come back in just a moment.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, physician Dr. Dwayne Murray detained by police over post allegedly made via social media platform Facebook. The National Cultural Foundation, the NCF, launches its collection of Vincentian patriotic and school songs at the Peace Memorial Hall. And the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Community College, the SVGCC, signs a memorandum of understanding with the Sajiko Carefield School of Business Management and the University of the West Indies.
And in sports, Vermont and Sandy Gully played to a 1-all draw yesterday at the Camden Park playing field. And Guardian General Saints have punched their ticket to the quarterfinals of the SVGCA Inc. Neil Williams T20 competition. In the region, the documentary 501 Not Out, highlighting the extraordinary career of Brian Lara, opened at the 15th TNT Film Festival.
Join us at 7 p.m. this evening for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, September 18th is $394,300. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
Welcome back, and before we took our second break, there was the question where someone was asking whether or not the Act addresses protection of consumers using electronic payment platforms that are emerging locally. So does it?
Locally would mean that it is not a service like a PayPal, I would assume. So it would be something that would have been established by a company within St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Distance selling does not address that. So it would have to be dependent on the problem that you're having with the particular provider. And there is provisions within the Act in terms of rescinding agreements, and you can use those provisions where you can get relief there if you make the complaint, depending on what it is. If the person, maybe you made the payment and the payment, they're saying that the payment did not go through, or they didn't get you can't get a receipt of that payment or something, then the Act provides for giving receipts or being able to rescind the agreement if you are not satisfied with the service, and so on. So the Act does give some protection to those persons. So I would believe that it would be addressed by the actual Act, but it depends on what exactly the nature of the dispute. So you would have to go into the department and say exactly what the dispute is, and then they would look at the relevant provision that it could probably fall under. I don't think this is one that is so simple to just say, yes, I can pick up this and say, yes, you've breached this or you've breached that. It all depends on what type of breach it is, and then the relevant provision in the Act would apply, because the Act is pretty wide.
Okay.
There's another issue.
There's a question. Yeah, you can raise that, but let's. Does the Consumer Protection Bill address the issue of public transportation, Uber-style services, and van men not completing their trip? For example, leaving persons at Pismo instead of Tokyo.
Well, those are not directly addressed by this Act.
Particular Act.
But there are other acts on the law books that address those issues. Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Ordinance, there's regulations there that address a lot of the transportation type issues. One I wanted to mention, though, because I had complaints in the last 3 weeks from farmers, and is the question of purchasing of fertilizer. some farmers complained to me that they basically went to pay and paid for fertilizer, and by the time they to get to the warehouse, there's no fertilizer in the warehouse, and they already paid their money. So it's a question of overselling. The issue of selling a good that you promise to deliver and you cannot deliver on time, this law addresses that issue. And it doesn't just address it in a simplistic way. Like some business people believe that, okay, I could oversell, take the person money, and then whenever the ship come in with the manual, then I just deliver. This act addresses compensation. Interest for the money and for the period of time you have the person money. The act also addresses it in a way where if, for example, the farmer had made a commitment with a contract to have the manual in place, to have the goods ready and to supply some other person, and they didn't do that, and there's some problem with that, they can also be compensated for damages. So the act go very far. So a lot of business people feel like, oh, take your money. You know, when we had layout, you take people money and then you change their flights and then you can't get to get onto your flight. This act is very straightforward on that. It says you must pay interest, and it not just those type of businesses. So Flow, if they take your money and they expect to deliver something for you, or a car dealer, they take your money and they expect to deliver the vehicle and they have a contract to deliver by such and such a time, and you fail to deliver, the consumer can take the matter up and they could be refunded plus interest plus damages. So it's very broad.
That's a very important point. Yeah. You raised the question of LIAT. Just using the name LIAT.
Yeah. Airlines.
You say, sorry, we cancel, but you could fly later. Mm-hmm. No compensation, your money tie up.
Yeah, you missing a meeting, you missing a negotiation, a job opportunity.
I don't want to fly later.
Yeah.
You understand? What they give you is a voucher that you use for future.
Yeah.
That's wrong. Under the Act, it deals with that.
It must be compensated, damages.
And the point of the fertilizer is very important. I had a complaint on the air 2 weeks ago. Lady went, she paid, and they say your fertilizer will be delivered at Rosebank.
Yeah.
No show. So she goes to Rosebank. No fertilizer.
Yes,
no call from the import warehouse to say, well, sorry, but what the truck might have broken down or what, nothing. And all our people are there waiting.
Yeah.
This provides redress.
She might have had workers line up to work the following day.
She had the workers there.
And Jeff should be compensated for the money
they were
she
there.
had to pay these workers who
To even just turn up.
To turn up, yes.
Which brings me to an important question. How do we prepare the consumer for this so that they can know that they can access what their rights and are? How do we prepare them? But first, someone wants to know that there are a number of products being sold both on the streets and in supermarkets that have no labeling. How does the Act address the issue of policing in this regard?
Well, the Act does address it. All goods must be labeled, clear labeling in English language.
Yeah.
And I know that is a major concern because now you buy something and you don't even know what you're consuming.
In Chinese or
putting in your body, which is a dangerous thing. And it must be simple enough for someone to be able to understand. And I know Burns spoke about children. Children and the elderly, persons living with disabilities are considered vulnerable persons. And the department has a duty to ensure that they protect those persons. So the Act does provide for proper labeling that would not wash off easily, labeling that is clear You can actually see what you're reading, because sometimes you have some labels and you could hardly see what's on it.
Yeah.
So you're just essentially guessing what to do, especially when it comes to medication. You're guessing what to take, or you have to get a flashlight or some sort of magnifying glass to see exactly what it is. So the Act does provide for clear labeling and in the English language.
But there should be the policing,
policing aspect,
yes.
Before that good leaves, our product leaves the port. The port has a responsibility to make sure that they meet the standards that the Standards Bureau establish. The Standards Bureau also could police it by sending their representatives to the various supermarkets, the various stores, to verify that these products are compliant with the standards regulations. So there are regulations and there are people who has to do their job. So I am saying here, the Standards Bureau have a responsibility, so people shouldn't be complaining about lack of labeling. There is also the people at Customs who has a responsibility. If a good is coming in there that is not fitted to whatever our standard is, should be rejected. So
Junior, also the locally made products, because for some reason some local manufacturers, whether they're small or not, they also are under this duty to label the products. I know that the minister has certain powers to exempt certain types of businesses or businesses from certain provisions under the Act and obligations under the Act. But it is important for people to know, especially when any product, I was going to say food product, but any product that you're going to use, that you know exactly what you're consuming, that you know what you're putting on your skin, and you know what you're giving to your child. So it doesn't matter whether you're a homemade, you're in your house and you're making patties, for instance. You don't put what's in the product, the ingredients in the product. You don't talk about the fact that, as you spoke about in terms of the environment, whether genetically modified ingredients are in that product. So it is important that you label properly in this day and age, where it's really, really important for us to take care of ourselves and our health. We see the COVID situation. We need to label properly.
Okay, on that note, it's time for a commercial break. We'll continue when we come back after this final break.
One scratch card, 3 games, 16 chances to win. Win with a top prize of $125,000. Unbelievable but true. It's the new $10 scratch game. $125,000 jackpot. Loaded with lots of cash prizes, $100, $1,000, $10,000, and $125,000. Get your ticket from any lotto agent or scratch runner. $125,000 jackpots. There's cash to catch with just a scratch.
In the shade, 96 degrees in the shade. Real hot, oh yeah, in the shade. 96 degrees in the shade. Real hot, oh yeah.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, physician Dr. Dwayne Murray detained by police over post allegedly made via social media platform Facebook. The National Cultural Foundation, the NCF, launches its collection of Vincentian patriotic and school songs at the Peace Memorial Hall. And the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Community College, the SVGCC, signs a memorandum of understanding with the Sajiko Carefield School of Business Management and the University of the West Indies.
And in sports, Vermont and Sandy Gully played to a 1-all draw yesterday at the Camden Park playing field. And Guardian General Saints have punched their ticket to the quarterfinals of the SVGCA Inc. Neil Williams T20 competition. In the region, the documentary 501 Not Out, highlighting the extraordinary career of Brian Lara, opened at the 15th TNT Film Festival.
Join us at 7 p.m. this evening for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, September 18th is $394,300. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
Welcome back. Well, during our break, we were having quite an interesting discussion amongst us. We spoke about a number of things, the whole question of pharmacies, when they would break a bottle to sell out of that bottle, and the necessary information, all of it is not there. We spoke about the whole issue of cross-bordering and what are some of the issues, cross-border trade. So I don't know which one of you want to get the ball rolling for this final segment, but there's a question. Someone wants to know whether or not the Act cover consumers that take part in the informal economy and non-registered businesses, street vendors, pushcart operators, barbecue sale, etc. A lot of consumers take part in these type of activities and they are not without grievances.
But I think that is what really that's what we were talking about. The thing is, and you made a very important point. Recall. I know here in St. Vincent the Grenadines, you turn on your television, you hear the recall in vehicles made and so.
Yeah.
But people tell you here, no, that don't apply. If you buy it in America. But your vehicle was made the same place.
Yes.
And nobody recalls it. None of the agents recall the vehicles here, but they recall either for a defect in the brakes or something like that. So they get a free ride. Then you have people that shop in the Dutch countries, and the goods are in Dutch. But people go, oh, they look nice, they buy it. But you don't know. I had some friends in Canada, and two of their kids could not eat anything that contained nuts. And anytime they buy a produce, the mother goes through and reads it down, because these are small kids, and they are allergic reaction once nuts. And I met people in St. Vincent the Grenadines with the same complaint.
Yes.
They would eat something and say, well, they get sick. They, what is? Go to the doctor, say you're allergic to certain things. So you have to read. And the point Junior made is a very important point. You order stuff in bulk in the pharmacy. The pharmacist throws out the tablets and, this little gizmo, put them in a brown envelope.
Right.
And tell you take one twice a day or whatever. But the expiry date is not written on that little thing you get there. So you go on home with it, and the product expire. I went into a store a couple of weeks ago to buy a little thing you put in the back of the neck of your dog.
Yes, I know that.
And it's my fault too. I purchased the thing and I usually think don't expire.
Yeah.
It expired.
Yes, that's so it
So
didn't work.
the thing is that we have to be we ourselves have to take some form of responsibility when we're purchasing. Because you have the power, it's your money. So you have to read and see that what you are buying will be useful.
Right.
And not something that, should not be used after a particular date. That's what the manufacturers tell you.
The reason in relation to the point of the informal trade and the informal sector, which is a fast-growing sector in developing countries. This is not unique to St. Vincent in the least. And one of the major debates when we were doing this bill at the OECS level was how to treat with the informal sector, because you want everybody to make a living. And we know that the informal trade is such a big sector for us. That's the way people make money in these smaller and bigger islands in the Caribbean. And a lot of debate was around whether or not they should be exempted from this bill. But the person who asked that question is very correct. They are also selling goods and products and providing services for which consumers require protection. And I had the opportunity to research that point when I had to do a training for the Commonwealth Secretariat in relation to the persons here who would be administering the bill, because they had asked that question. And I looked at the South Africa and New Zealand consumer protection legislation, and they had also had that debate about the informal sector, and they also saw that it was necessary to protect consumers in relation to persons who trade within the informal sector. So they are not exempted at all from this bill. The Crown is not even exempted from this bill. So the services provided by the Crown, you can also make your complaints if there is a dispute in relation to the Crown. Of course, you have to go through, different things and so on when it comes to the Crown. But in terms of the informal sector, they are not exempted. They too should be giving you labels. They need to give you, if they don't have a trade name, which is, they go to SIPO and they trade as, or they're a company.
And SIPO is?
SIPO is the Commercial and Intellectual Property Office. Sorry for the lawyer speak. Yes, and so they need to also give you their personal name. So if you're trading just as Teresa Daniel, you need to indicate that this is your trading name. I'm trading as myself in my personal capacity. So for those persons, those informal persons who would trade on the streets, you would see them on the different businesses and on the sidewalks. You can also ensure that you get your name from their name for yourself, so that if you have a complaint, you can say who it is. If you have to go and look for the person the next day, if you bought Tanya, because agricultural products is also covered under this. If you bought Edos and all of that, you can go back to them and say, look, I had, a problem with it. Can I get a refund? And I know a lot of people in St. Vincent, merchants, like to say they don't give refunds.
But you got to.
But you have to. If you sell a good that is defective, if you sell a good that you marketed in a different way and you expect that it's going to be something when you open it and you're seeing something totally different, and the person brings it back. If you bring a good, if you sell a good that the person finds some fault with it, and the person wants a refund, they don't want something else for it, then you have to give them that refund. The Act doesn't contemplate like what they do in the States, where I just don't like this scarf. I think I prefer the one Teresa has on, so I'm going to take it back tomorrow and get the other one. The act does not provide for that because we realize that we are in small economies and we can't have, that sort of thing where I just don't like it and I'm going to take it back. But if it is defective in some way, then you can take it back to the merchant and you can ask for a refund if you don't want something else.
I don't want us to leave today without talking about the responsibilities of the consumer, because we have this grand bill, this grand act, but what are the responsibilities of the consumer?
Well, what we are doing here is part of helping the consumer to know their rights and know their responsibilities. And one of their responsibilities is to be informed. Through VC3 now, we are trying to inform consumers. The other is another important part of consumer protection is solidarity. We must support others. So when there is somebody complain about something, we could decide, look, I'm not buying that because I hear somebody on the Bonds program saying this, I must protect myself. So there's some measure of solidarity. We have a responsibility to complain and to seek redress. You don't just take it and go home and then you say, wait, this thing is bad, and then you sit down on it. Then Teresa buy it and she has the same problem. The business people still making money. They don't know that they are not fulfilling the need that the product was intended to meet.
One of the major things of the consumer to be informed.
Yeah.
In your own right.
Yes.
In your own right. I mean, people have it down to it. Say, you're buying at this store, you ain't buying at another store because you would have had an experience. And you keep it to yourself. And you say, you're buying from them, but you're not saying why.
Why? Exactly.
So it is important to share that information so that it might be a friend. Don't fall in the same trap and learn the hard way. And prior to this, we'll lose the money too. But this protects you, this bill.
Yes. Teresa, I would say it's important for consumers as well not to try to sensationalize something. I had 2 experiences recently where I was concerned about the quality of two products, and I was able to go to the requisite persons, the supplier, and they sorted it out very nicely for me. And I was quite satisfied and shopped again at the same place. So it's important for us not to demonize suppliers and distributors and sellers and so on by going on Facebook. And you know how we like to do sometimes. Facebook has become the talk of everybody.
I'm getting the signal that we need to go. So, final note.
Final note, read more. This act is here for you to read, know your rights, and act on your rights. The Consumer Affairs Department is there for you. So read the act as much as you can.
Thank you very much. That's our program for today. The news is next. Danine Jones, Burns Bonadie, and Junior Bacchus. Thank you so very much. There's so much to this that we can go on and on and on all year. Thank you, and thank you for viewing. See you again next time. Good evening.